Okay, thanks everybody. I think every fund, and there's quite a number of funds sitting here, fund CEOs and fund staff, I suspect they'll all have a different story to tell about their own experiences, about how they've effectively gone about managing growth, and particularly given a changing landscape. And we heard Hugh Mackay this morning, talk to us about what's effectively happened in the past, but certainly the key message I took away is that one thing that we can certainly expect going forward is that we can expect more change. So my presentation this afternoon will focus on sharing with you HOSTPLUS's, I suppose, experience in managing its growth, and I'm going to do that by looking at a number of concepts. They are the issue of people, competition. I'll just put all these up. Let's go back. People, competition, product and service infrastructure, and something that everyone asks me about, marketing and branding. I will place particular emphasis on talking about service and infrastructure, and more specifically talk to you about the decision that we made in 2006 about insourcing our contact centre and just some of the broad-based thinking behind that. And also I'll talk, as I alluded to earlier on, a little bit about branding. So hopefully you might be able to take something away from today's presentation and apply it in your everyday work life. So a little bit of background about HOSTPLUS. So let's put this presentation in some context. We are the hospitality, we are the only national hospitality, tourism, recreation and sporting industry. So, and I've got to make the claim, like most other chief executives, we are one of the biggest. So we've only got $7 billion, or just over $7 billion in funds under management, but in all seriousness, we've got 860,000 members Australia-wide, and more interestingly enough is that we've got 46,000 contributing employers. So just think about the paperwork there. We've certainly outstripped in terms of our growth rates. We've certainly outstripped the market average over the last 7 or 8 years. The fund, and some of you have actually heard me say this before, seems to double in size every 3 to 4 years. So it's just quite extraordinary growth there. That's the employer growth that I was alluding to. So in 2001 it was about 16,000 contributing employers. In 2007 it's just under 44,000. Our membership growth, we've close to doubled in size in terms of membership growth in the last 6 years. But as most of you would probably be aware, with this, with this stellar growth certainly comes quite a number of growing pains and challenges for all of us in terms of how to manage this particular growth as the industry continues to change, both from a regulatory, economic and certainly from a political environment. I started with HOSTPLUS in 1999. This is what the org structure sort of looked like. We had a board made up of 12 directors at that time. We had the chief executive officer. We had an operations manager, which was me, so I was responsible for investments, fund accounting, compliance, photocopying, filing, making coffee, which I still do. We also had an administration manager. That individual was largely responsible for the broad-based admin functions. We claimed to have had a marketing activity. We had a limited marketing activity at that time. There was a sales and service function. And we had a few staff working in a service and support perspective. 2008. I think we got most of that, Umberto, on there. The organisation has changed and changed substantially. Today we operate through 7 business units, that's what we refer to them. So we have a finance area, we have a marketing and strategy area, we have a service and financial planning area, we have administration, we have compliance, we have investments, but more importantly we have a HR function. Okay, something that up until probably about 2 years ago, I think it was between myself, my PA, we had a payroll officer, we were largely responsible, we were the HR function within the organisation. So we've got 2 people employed in that area, and we're likely to employ a further staff member in due course. We employ over 110 staff at the trustee level. A lot of this growth has certainly come about and is largely attributed to our decision, as I alluded to earlier on in 2006, to insource the contact or service centre in-house. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We are definitely not a small business, and I was thinking about the comment you made, Greg. Whilst we only employ about 110 people, I think when you include the number of people that are employed by our administrators, our custodians, our insurers, our asset consultants, I suspect there's probably about another 200 odd people working specifically to service our broad-based membership. So what's been the driving force? Let me put all these up here. Well, from my perspective, it's competition. It's the introduction of choice. The competition that it brings, the changing nature, and I think the volume of regulation around a competitive market, largely focused at protecting our members. In a choice and competitive environment, I think the challenges before the superannuation industry will certainly be greater, as our organisations, and certainly those that lead it, do come under greater scrutiny. We've certainly seen the level of media reporting in Australia over the last 12 to 18, or for that matter over the last 2 years. We've just had saturation coverage. I suspect that the level of media scrutiny and the media reporting, it'll just remain unabated. I mean, you can just expect it to become a norm. Unsurprisingly, a lot of that media focus has largely been on the scenario of movements. Are industry funds going to grow at a greater level than the retail funds? So it's largely been about the movement and disbursements within the industry. I think there's been very little focus on the kind of leadership that is required to steer our organisations and the overall industry, certainly as our trade becomes subject of dinner party conversations and discussions. We've often heard that lack of strategic vision and the inability to execute are the leading reasons given by business influencers for business failures, and that ultimately leads to a loss of credibility and ultimately poor results. So what does this mean in a superannuation context, and what's it mean for us? It is, as I said it, about funds being believable. It is about demanding high ethical standards. It is about communicating a clear vision inside the organisation. It is about training and retaining quality staff, quality management, as we've heard the other two speakers, Anne-Marie and David, talk about. It's about motivating and inspiring employees. It's managing crises, downturns, effectively communicating a clear vision outside the organisation, executing strategic vision effectively. There's so many other issues that obviously we're all having to contend with as funds today. There's no doubt that funds will have to pay greater attention to these key drivers as our performance, as our reputation comes under greater scrutiny. And I should emphasise, I think achieving these particular outcomes does come at a cost and considerable effort. I'll just put these up. Okay. Growth has also obviously clearly had an impact on our culture. I won't go into too much detail, but certainly from our perspective, in a very, very simplistic way to describe this, culture develops very, very quickly. So from our perspective, you move from largely an organic, type of structure to more formal operating reporting lines, as you saw in the previous slides. Competition, I think, also requires you not to rest on your laurels. You need to be certainly more aggressive. You need to be more proactive in your growth and your retention efforts. But you can simply no longer rely on inertia. If you do nothing, then I think at the end of the day you will lose membership. Under the award structure, pre-choice, we pretty much inherited brand loyalty as we saw it at that time. Members were put into our fund. We sent them a statement, and that was largely the extent of our marketing at that time. Post-choice, you've certainly seen a proliferation of mass advertising, vying for member loyalty, and in many instances it's all about acquisition. And some funds like ourselves, we've certainly been quite aggressive, and we've learned a hell of a lot about marketing, a lot about branding, and we've certainly employed some sophisticated, what I would consider sophisticated member analytics to try and hone in on the message, specifically to the needs and varying profiles of our broad-based membership, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In terms of our product and service offering, product commoditisation does create intense rivalry, so lack of differentiation is driving competitors to augment their basic offering with related services like financial literacy programs, and other bells and whistles. So when we started, and I think most of you here would have a similar story to tell. We started with a humble accumulation product, and today we offer a range of related financial products and services to our members. We have banking products, we have insurance products, financial planning products. We've got a travel club. We're just about to launch our pension product, largely driven by the notion of wanting to capture and retain our broad-based membership share. Competitor and consumer forces has driven this, which has also driven certainly our need to increase the resources and the infrastructure we have to support the underlying service delivery. We also identified an opportunity to create a point of difference in 2006 when we decided to bring our contact centre in-house. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right decision. Our strategy was to distinguish ourselves in the superannuation market by offering the best combination of good performance, low cost and best member customer experience. This last bit, best customer member experience, is a business pursuit, and certainly one that we consider an imperative and crucial to our element of success going forward. When on average, and this is again in our case, you have well over 2,000 member interactions a day, it's over 700,000 per year, it is through these interactions that you have the opportunity to deliver a positive member experience. The opportunities from our perspective to entangle, to engage our members with our brand are certainly endless. We therefore felt that we could no longer outsource this function, opportunity, customer member experience, but more importantly bring it strongly and directly in line with the service-orientated and brand values of HOSTPLUS, the fund, and more importantly take direct responsibility and accountability for it. Our rationale was one where we continue to retain certainly a strong working relationship with our administrator as the main engine of our operations, but we do take control of all the customer interfacing points. 1 year on, we certainly feel that we are providing improved customer and member services. We are delivering greater customer and member choice, and certainly improving and leveraging the cross-marketing opportunities and retention opportunities that this provides. Conscious of time, so let me talk a little bit about brand. Experience has also taught us that investing and increasing brand awareness are critical to certainly to sustaining our growth and our long-term success. So building strong brands, as most of you would know, isn't getting any easier. There's been an explosion of brands as well as a proliferation of the ways to communicate them. It certainly has made it more challenging for us to try and get that message across. At HOSTPLUS, we embarked upon our own brand enhancing strategy a few years ago to ensure our branding icon and message connected with the diverse demographic profile of our members. So back in the early 80s, when Madonna was singing Like a Prayer, this is what we look like from a branding perspective. Okay, some of you might remember that. Brand mid to late 90s. In the late 90s, when the Spice Girls were together and belting out Wannabe, we started creating some consistency, certainly in our branding, with the use of common industry images using magazine-type formats. Then nothing happened in our case after the year 2000 except for a Paul Michael Jackson revival that some of you may have recalled, but we certainly looked to reinvent ourselves with new imagery, formats and approach. The reality is that all this effort was quite subjective from our perspective, and it was largely design driven with no real purpose or fundamental strategy linking it back to the functional and emotional benefits of the fund. So in the lead up to choice, the leadership team at HOSTPLUS, starting with the board, embarked on the transformation, as I certainly saw it at that time, from being an industry super fund business to being an industry super fund brand. We view our business as a living thing, organism. So we took the view that we also took that view certainly with our brand development. This alignment is the basis, I think, of our living brand. So it is no coincidence that I use the music analogies. People like the Madonnas, like the Michael Jacksons, and our very own Kylie Minogue reinvent themselves. They reinvent themselves to remain relevant and contemporary with the changing times. And we feel certainly our brand is no different. Today, this is what we look like today. So using this notion of exceeding expectation, the fund has embarked on repositioning the fund's brand with the positioning of expect more. It links closely with the strategic initiatives of the fund, including obviously the action to insource the contact centre, and we think it will create service and qualities that our members can expect and should expect from a membership. While features and benefits like price are still important, they can be easily replicated. Therefore, experience and certainly personal identity become more important. We expect more for 3 reasons. It rallies. We have a shared standard by which we measure certainly ourselves, both internally and with key business partners. It challenges. We believe members should demand more of their super fund and certainly demand a hell of a lot more from HOSTPLUS. And thirdly, it actually promises. It simply says that members will receive more with HOSTPLUS. It's not a lengthy mission or vision statement that sits in an ornate frame, as you walk into my office or any of the other offices. It's 2 very simple words that create the basis for what we stand for, what we do, and cuts across, I think, all the products and service attributes that we create and are currently offering. And just, I suppose, in conclusion, I think just some final comments. The single biggest challenge, I think, for any organisation is to manage growth and their customer or member expectations. This is no different to HOSTPLUS, and it certainly remains one of our most fundamental priorities. As funds become larger, the question of where to compete is just as important as how. To choose the right battlegrounds, funds must match their distinctive capabilities with sectors where profitable growth is likely to occur. To mitigate risks and to continue to underpin the HOSTPLUS member promise, our approach has been to outsource our strategic resources by employing the very best in the field. These approaches have certainly worked well for our members and certainly have been attested to by internal benchmarks as well as quite a number of external benchmarks. So on that note, thank you.
Thanks, David. We now have a nice, comfortable question period. I'd like to exercise my position as chairman and ask the first question. It's actually quite difficult for us to see, so if you want to ask a question, you might have to jump up and wave your arms around to attract the attention down here. My first question is, it's a bit philosophical, I guess, because I question whether super funds really are operating as businesses, and I think they do at an operational level, but not at a higher level. And the 2 reasons for that are because of regulations. There's things like the pesky sole purpose test, and also aspects of CIS which limit how much they can induce people to become members. But also, more importantly, the trustee board does not have the same desire to make money for itself and shareholders as a public or private company, and that's not a bad thing. But I just think that they are different. What I wonder is the fact that for a super fund, your shareholders are also your customers. Does that limit how aggressive you can be in terms of your marketing, either for members or new employers? If they were not your shareholders, if they were customers, then you could engage for a limited period anyway in some churning and burning, which is fairly common in businesses, stockbroking in particular from time to time. You can't do that when your customers are also your shareholders. How limiting is that, or do you think it is limiting in your marketing activities? David, at the end?
Actually, I would say that our shareholders are our strength, and in fact aren't limiting. What makes industry funds distinctive is their privileged access to the workplace, and the fact that we have the support of our sponsoring organisations who advocate for us in the workplace. And that's the way in which we're able to, from a wholesale distribution point of view, able to keep our costs low because we have that support. So I would say that it's not a constraint, it's actually one of the key strengths of an industry fund.
Can I just maybe make a couple of comments there? I'm probably the wrong person to answer that question. I don't know how much how much more aggressive we can be in terms of our own marketing activities. We've certainly never seen the sole purpose test as being a restrictor in any shape or form. That's certainly not our experience. I think the regulator has taken a far more practical and reasonable approach, given obviously the changing landscape, and it's largely been driven by this notion of choice and competition. So, you know, I've often said again, you cannot implement a choice regime and then say to industry funds, you cannot compete and use, I think, all the appropriate business tools at your disposal in order to, one, retain first and foremost your broad-based membership, and secondly, to the extent that you pursue an acquisition-based strategy, that you use marketing techniques and initiative to do that.
Can I make a comment too, Greg? I mean, any organisation works within a regulatory framework, so even businesses of any sort have to do that. You know, and I've served on boards of organisations that, government organisations, but are required to make a profit. And so if you take those sort of parameters, people would think from the outside that you're not able to do that. I don't think that's a restrictor. I think that any organisation works, A, within its regulatory framework, but B, within its strategic framework. So I would disagree that organisations go to any lengths to satisfy shareholders. They do it within a strategic vision, or they ought to, and if they don't, they probably fall over because of that. So I think that it's just a different environment, but it doesn't mean it's a lesser environment.
A question up the back there.
Jared Noonan from Just Super. I'm glad that we passed you on to better things, David, and stick with us, Greg. Look, my question is this: amongst the industry fund and government sector funds, what you might call the family, it's a bit unclear exactly how many are employed across that sector, but there's probably, I mean, the three representatives down here are probably employing something like 500 people all told. In the next 2 to 5 years' time, where do the new employees come from who have that distinctive industry fund background or sensibilities? I know some of you have touched on this, but where do you see that coming from, that recruitment process, or do you think it's necessary?
I'm happy to have a go at that one, Jared. You're attracting people into the industry. The industry fund culture has grown up over having the members at the forefront of what they do. And it's driven by that, and it's not driven by, as Greg said, making profits outside, but it's still driven by making profits, and it's profits for those members. And I don't think it's that hard to find people that have those ideals, that have the technical skills that we will be seeking across a whole broad range of things. So we all experience the same thing as every other business in Australia at the moment in terms of skills shortages. We've got them in lots of places, and there has to be obviously some national solutions to the skills shortage. But in terms of finding people that have the right qualities to continue the industry fund tradition, I don't think that's a hard thing to do. And we have people, I have people that come to HESTA that take pay cuts to work for HESTA because they like the ideals of what the organisation stands for. And I think I'm seeing more of them now than I did 10 years ago.
I might just also have a go at that, a couple of thoughts. One is that I've just come out of a Cbus coordinators conference, and I was struck by just listening to the discussion about the fund, knowing that in fact actually Cbus has drawn from our coordinators from a diverse range of our unions and our employer sponsoring organisations. And I couldn't tell where people came from, which side of the fence in that discussion. They were just talking about the importance of members. So that really struck me in terms of that sense of passion, drawing from your sponsoring organisations is I think a continuing source of where we'll get our future employees from, but also knowing that increasingly the need for funds to draw on different skill sets as we have to cope with different issues, That is a challenge because you're getting people who are coming from more commercial backgrounds, and there is a cultural shift to make when you're operating in those environments. And that's why I think it's very important that funds are conscious about making sure they're doing that knitting process where you're drawing upon the skills and expertise of people who come from outside a not-for-profit environment with the heritage of where the funds have come from. But I do agree with Anne-Marie that it's a very appealing place to work for employees, the idea that you're working for a not-for-profit organisation. So as long as we're doing our job right, we shouldn't have too much difficulty attracting staff with that kind of proposition.
Just if I could just make a couple of comments there, Jared. You're probably aware also that I suppose your term was the family is also quite active in through the cadetship program to try and bring in, I suppose, future, leaders of the industry, people who, will get some exposure to industry funds at a very, very early age and hopefully make the decision and choice to pursue a career within the industry movement. At the same time, I think one of the things that we do offer is that we are a growing industry, actually a very attractive industry to a lot of young workers out there. We're certainly finding that. And we think, with that growth, you are able to create opportunities. You are able to look for, from within the organisation in order to promote people to more senior positions. And we've got numerous examples and case studies of that. And I suppose I'll just add to the comment that Anne-Marie made. Look, we've had people leave the organisation for more money and then come back in 3 months' time and say, look, can I get my job back again? Now, in about 3 instances we did that, but we've said no more. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. So, I think a lot of the funds are working, quite hard to try and create a culture. And, culture is about people at the end of the day to try and attract individuals and retain individuals going forward.
I'll just ask another question. There's been a lot of talk about keeping members in retirement, and there's certainly a boom in retirement products being offered by big super funds. How important will that be in terms, given that membership growth is going to be slow or maybe even declining for some funds in the future? Asset growth will be probably slower than the last few years due to markets. How important is that retirement market from a membership point of view? And if it is important, what does that mean to the reason that a fund exists in the first place?
I think it's absolutely critical. And I think that, the point in which our members need us most is when they are coming to that pre-retirement decision-making mode and they've got, potential, substantial account balances there, and that is when they're most vulnerable to making bad decisions. We know that longevity risk is a key dynamic now, that people will live longer in retirement than in the past. Every dollar counts. So the kind of products and the kind of decisions they make going into retirement is absolutely critical. So, and I think we're seeing the evolution of super as we move from communicating with our members in the accumulation phase to the wind down phase. So funds need to move into that space and are beginning to do so.
In our case, it hasn't been such a pressing issue. The average age of the HOSTPLUS people is about 26. So we've got a very, very young membership. And even we've done some analysis in terms of projecting out if our membership was to remain as it is today, what it would look like in 20 years' time. And I think the average at that time would be about 45. So it's less of a pressing issue for us. Having said that, we're certainly conscious of the fact that whilst there's a small portion of retirees within the fund, they do represent quite a substantial part of funds under management. So we'll certainly be looking at launching something by the end of this year.
I mean, David's point about evolution is the one, it's the super funds in this country is at a very immature, it's the wrong word, but, it hasn't been in place, 20 years is really the existence of most funds. And so it is evolutionary and our members are building up their account balances. If you look at the average account balance, in Australia at the moment, I think it's just less than $20,000, and certainly the payout for retirees in the last lot of figures I saw was something like 75,000 for men and something like, I think, less than 40,000 for women. So obviously this hasn't been an issue across the board. It has been for a very small sector of the population, which the press continue to concentrate on, but not for the majority. And so I think that it's important to think for the majority. We're now getting to the stage of account balances where it's going to make a difference in terms of what they do in retirement, and not just take the lump sum and pay off the mortgage and, or, you know, buy the new car or whatever with their small amount that they got, that will now make, you know, make a difference. And so part of that evolutionary concept is to offer those products into retirement as well, and we'll be certainly doing that.
Do you see super funds ever actually actively going after the retirement market, so getting members that they didn't have when they were working?
I think that'll differ between funds, depending on, you know, where they sit in the market, what industries they might cover. For some funds, that may be something they'll need to do in terms of maintaining, you know, their growth. Others, it won't be the need to do that. A bit like people, you know, public offer funds. You've got some public offer funds that market very strategically right across the board, and you have others that keep within defined sort of sectors.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we are on time. So can you please thank Anne-Marie and David Elia and David Atkin.